Welcome, everybody. I'm Courtney Adair Johnson. I'm the gallery director in the Department of Art here at Tennessee State University. And we're excited to have you here today. This is our last of the 2022 fall semester art talk with David Jon Walker. Yay! So I'm gonna read a short bio about David, and then we'll hand it over to him. So David Jon Walker is an associate professor of art at Austin Peay State University in Clarksville, Tennessee, teaching web and graphic design. A graduate of Tennessee State University, go Big Blue. He is presently pursuing his Master's of Fine Art at Yale in graphic design. He's honed his skills as a design servant leader, working extensively with community and government organizations to provide an aesthetic face and visual message for engaging campaigns to bolster community support or simply generate awareness. He's also the owner of Rhealistic, and I'll spell it and put it in the chat for you, a design and strategy consultant that provides graphic design and web development. So we're super excited to have you here today as one of our alums and also off doing, wonderful, great stuff in graphic design. So yeah, I'm gonna put you on the big screen.
All right, well, thank you so much. I'm elated and grateful to have been invited. I'll go ahead and share screen. Whoops, not that. That's great. Done. Slideshow. All right. Can everyone see that? Thumbs up. All right. So, as Courtney stated, I'm David Jon Walker. I'm class of 2004. Kalina Sales and I were classmates. And I don't know if she's given a professional talk to you all before, but beyond the classroom, but it almost like is, for us, it's like the tale of two halves in the way we've like gone apart and kind of converged in careers, which has been like really, really special. But I want to talk about being seen and heard, coming from a HBCU. So first things first, not gonna lie, like I was super nervous about this. As a alumnus or an alumni and speaking to classmates and former professors and whoever else might be on this call, whether it be former students and colleagues. And then the fact that this is like the last one of this session and we've had like famous people in the series that have done like amazing stuff, like Art Sims and Forrest Young, who are friends of mine too. But in the words of, Tupac, against all odds, this may be the realest talk I ever spoke. So this talk is to the students of Tennessee State, because I've never had a chance to talk candidly about my experience at school and kind of how it's been since then. So I'll just roll right into it. So the truth of the matter is what you're doing right now at Tennessee State will actually affect your entire life. And I definitely am gonna walk you through that. So Tennessee State, as a student, you roll right into a community of people. It's all love, people coming from different places and backgrounds. You've got affluence, you've got poverty, you've got it all in the mix. Locally, regionally, and nationally coming together to form like this great amalgamation of thoughts and dialogue. But for me, like as a student, I came in as a biology major, and then eventually after 2 years of like being burnt out and playing around, changed to studio art. But as I'm sure most of you all are telling people right now, graphic design is your major. So Kalina will attest to this. We had virtually 2 graphic design classes, intro to desktop publishing and web design. And that was kind of it. So for you all to have more classes, I'm like amazingly proud and thankful that you all are getting a good bit more than we did. But as a student, I was into software, I was into relationships and really attempting to figure out my passion. And so I really enjoyed like illustration with McBride. I enjoyed jewelry making with Jane Allen McKinney. I enjoyed photography with Herman Beasley, um, and drawing with what's Paul's last name? I forget. Paul Zeppelin. Yes. I don't know if he's still there or not, but it was fantastic. So when you get to school and change your major from a biology to art, you try and like you end up gravitating towards people that are seemingly like passionate too. And one person that we were in class with was a guy by the name of David Ferguson. And at this time, like he was drawing comics, and I feel like he's still drawing comics now. And I was into like Macromedia Flash and attempting to learn Quark Express and really pushing the envelope on what I could make. And so our professor, who was trained in ceramics and photography, Dr. Herman Beasley, basically gave us magazines and said, hey, like, if you want to learn magazine design, like recreate this thing. And so it necessarily wasn't like strong direction, but it was a start. And so from there, like he took us out of the country. We went to Bermuda for study abroad trips. This is Dr. Beasley here and Mrs. Deborah Watson, who worked in alumni relations. And I mean, we had a fantastic time abroad. Like we worked with the tourism agency and we developed scripts for movies. We were shooting film. We also created a magazine when we got back, which is what we actually were graded on. And I mean, to look back at that, I actually don't have pictures of it. I wish I did. I think Dr. Beasley has a copy of it at his house. But to look back at that is like really cringeworthy at this point. But nonetheless, we were able to really get embedded in culture and see a different aspect of life beyond Jefferson Street, life beyond the campus, life beyond Nashville. And so like this is one of the dinners. I actually went on 3 study abroad trips. Here Michael McBride was on one of the trips with us. And thinking about like, you know, when I talk about like relationships, our professors became our friends, or at least if you were intentional about making a professor a friend, or you had interest in something, they would like point you in the right direction. So after we got back, and I've circled Mr. McBride here because when we got back, he introduced us, David Ferguson and I, to Andy Anderson that ran Anderson Studios, which was a screen printing shop in Nashville. And from there, like before I got out of school, I began screen printing shirts for local organizations on campus. And then also started screen printing shirts for, you know, people off campus. And so I started this business and things were going great. And I'm like, all right, I'm a graphic designer, but I know how to screen print. I tepidly know Illustrator. I tepidly know Quark. I know Photoshop well enough, and then I can design like animations through Flash. So pushing that out, I get this Bachelor of Science in Studio Art, which doesn't, with 2 classes in graphic design, doesn't give us a lot of options, or at least give me a lot of options to roll with. And what I mean by that, I wanted to go and work for an agency, or an agency in town. I looked at the Bunton Group and I looked at Locomotion Creative. I called and got interviews with them, took my portfolio in, showed them my stuff, and they said, thank you for your visit. You've got good work, but it's not a good fit for us, which was kind for saying your work isn't that great. All right, so knowing the lingo, I'm like, man, like, what am I gonna do? Now, at the same time, talk about post-graduation and what you're doing at Tennessee State affecting your life. I ended up having a kid like right after graduation. So graduated in May, child born November 16th of 2004. So I'm like, all right, I got to strategize, figure out what to do next. So because I was about relationships and building things and understanding what design is like, I was already like pushing things out with screen printing and t-shirts and doing all that stuff. So I started thinking about organizations, politicians, nonprofits, and small businesses, and learning the vernaculars of all of those things so that I could find clients and find money. I was a stay-at-home parent, so I was taking my kid around to skirt the cost of daycare, which I couldn't afford as a new dad at 23, which is crazy to think of now. But these are some of the works that I was creating. For Alpha Chi is a chapter of Delta on campus. Alpha Rho is a chapter at University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. I was doing stuff for restaurants. This is Rochester, New York. Just getting on the phone, making phone calls to people that I knew and asking if they knew people that needed work. Now, at the time, like you could kind of see, and Kalina talks about this in some of her presentations, being aesthetically inspired by like the music things that we were seeing at the time, like Master P and that whole industry. But really like just pushing work out. So TE Pogue was the theater group on campus. I was also engaging with the National Baptist Convention of America because I had friends that my friend was a youth pastor. So I'm like starting to like push the envelope on really getting out there. Like this flyer was for a Greek show at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. My sister happened to be my younger sister happened to be the SGA president. And so she was like sending stuff to me too. So I'm like just making up clients in order to begin a trajectory on, you know, how to get a career going. Politicians, this is kind of wild to look back at this. So Brenda Gilmore, doing work for her. Vivian Wilhoit right now is the current property assessor for the city of Nashville. And I mean, we're almost 20 years later. Like she's still a client of mine. Erica Gilmore right now is the trustee. So she collects tax dollars for the city of Nashville. She's a current client of mine too. So I still do work for them and do work for the city. Brenda Gilmore just announced her retirement from state senate, which I helped get her elected to that. But thinking about the seeds that are planted all along the line, right? All of this work is still like, it was crazy digging this stuff up. So this is like a picture of me like selling shirts that I had screen printing at for the John Mayer Classic and actually selling things. But at the same time, like I've got this business going as a vendor of merchandise, and I'm also doing design work for like politicians, groups, and marketing folks. So in this same amount of time, I met Professor Eric Jackson, who was employed by John Gurton, who had a company, Mass Media, which was like the graphic design company of record for Mount Zion Baptist Church. And he also had a lot of other church clients, which was amazing. And at the time, like I met Mr. Gurton, my mom said, well, you know, you're gonna go into art. What are you gonna do with that? And I was like, I'm gonna be a graphic designer. It's a real career. Like it's gonna be a real thing. She's like, I don't know. Like, like most parents, you tell them art, they like cringe. But she said, well, there's this guy that's at the church. Like, I want you to meet him. So I met him. I went by the studio at the time. Like Eric was an employee of his. And he said, well, you know, just like the other guys, work is good, but it's not a good fit for us. But come back if you've got more stuff. So I was just persistent. And eventually he started like feeding me like smaller and smaller things. So I was doing church work and church conference work, also like designing like funeral programs, which actually is a big business for graphic design that is like under discussed. But it be your own people sometimes, right? That actually save your behind. So what I mean by that, Tennessee State became a client. So based on my relationship with Dr. Beasley, who's a professor, and Miss Watson, who was in student affairs, she like knew everybody, and she was like, "Oh, well, if this is what you want to do, then I can see who's willing to let you work or give you work." So athletics, media relations, Office of Institutional Planning, like run down the list, right? So I'm pushing out all of this work, and they've given me this platform to run with and really be the springboard for who I thought I wanted to be, like sports information design and just as I say, a graphic designer in general. So I'm doing everything like sports stuff, working with the Office of the President for the Freedom Riders, working with the Media Relations Department and designing the newsletter that went out across the state for all of the institutions for Tennessee, all of the institutions within the Board of Regents. Then worked on website designs. I mean, it was a big deal when I got some billboards to go up in the air, and I'm like, man, like I can tell my mom I'm doing, I'm actually making real work, like real people like can point and say, oh, that's mine. And at the time, like when these went up, I think my kid was like 2 or 3, so he's like starting to see stuff in real time. And eventually it went to the airport. Like I was the first person to put a billboard for Tennessee State in Nashville Airport. And this is like 2011, I think. But again, like how is all this stuff happening, right? And it really is about choosing a path and being persistent and not giving up and not stressing yourself out. So like all the while I'm selling merchandise for these people, t-shirts, hats, all of these other things, and it's paying for me to like take risk and undercharge on design projects. And of course, like being a college student or being a young adult, like the first few years are like rough. But these are my kids. I'm a dad. I've got 3. My son turned 18 yesterday. Dash, the little one, is 3 years old, and my daughter is 15 as a freshman in high school. And thinking back on how like I say, like what you do then affects everything. I'm a professor, so I'm sitting in a lab. Like I used to stay overnights in the lab at Tennessee State. Like I talked Dr. Beasley into letting me. I wasn't even on work study, but I had a key to the lab, and I would just stay there and like work on the work and learn the software. So I'm a professor. I'm a practicing designer. I still travel, so I take my kids out of the country as often as I can. Funny story: we almost got stuck abroad. This is 2 days before Trump shut the border down for us to get back. I'm an adventurer, so like outdoors. It's a waterfall somewhere in Tennessee. This is an adult ball pit in Medellin, Colombia. I'm a dreamer. This was like 2020, and I took a class with Ellen Lupton at Cooper Union, who is a co-author of a book with your esteemed professor, Kalina Sales. And at this time, I was thinking about what life would possibly be like if I lived in the Northeast. And now I'm a student again. Still have a job as a professor, but I'm currently a student living and operating in New Haven, Connecticut. So really it is about constant reinvention. Left biology, turned into an art student slash designer, and push into trying to figure out how to be a designer. So as a graphic designer, I create functional visual artifacts for others to use. And so talking about like politics and kind of where that's led, like we're almost, yeah, Kalina, like in 2 years, we would have been out of school for 20 years. So, you know, starting out in politics and learning the vernaculars for that and how people pivot and push campaigns and messaging, I was asked by Nina Turner to rebrand her campaign. She was the co-chair for Bernie Sanders for his presidential run. And originally they had branded her in his colors in tight. So it was like red and blue. And I was like, well, we don't necessarily need to redo that. So I didn't change her word mark. I changed the colors and how the word mark would show up in the rest of the world in the system. So in this brand system for them that I developed, it was meant to continue fundraising based on kind of what they had started before, not to just totally abandon it and make them start over to lose brand awareness, but to really like breathe new life into who she was going to be or who she was projecting to be as a US Congresswoman. So I introduced this brand palette and gradients that could be used in order to highlight her personality and not wash her out. Like if you look back at other campaigns by people of color, Kamala Harris or a Cory Booker, they typically will put them on color backgrounds and then gray them out, which is always weird to me. I don't know if that was like a more palatable way for them to be taken in by the public or not, but I really wanted to highlight her as an individual. So I looked at like type and how type could emote, thinking about her outsized personality and how she delivers messaging, but also the class in which she delivers it, pairing Pressio with Freight. And Freight is a typeface designed by a Black designer, Jonathan Darden of Darden Studios. And so I wanted to bring that forward. And then, of course, like just give them a system that they could roll through, as well as some promotional materials that they could raise money with. So National Museum of African American Music, I did not design this logo. I wish I did. The kerning on it is rough. But I was asked to create a piece for their entryway before people got into the exhibition itself. So if you go there now, you can see this in real time. This is a mock-up before they actually adhered it in vinyl lettering to the wall. But I really wanted to wrap you as the visitor in the narrative of Black music and Black culture before you're inundated with nothing but images and videos and pictures. And in this way, you can be enveloped by the type. This is Bayard by Vocal Type or Trace Seals. So I wanted to bring another Black type designer into focus with this. I've not seen this fully installed in person. This is when they were installing it on the first day. And they only had one side installed. And then this is kind of a guess who the silhouette picture is. Guess who the silhouetted figures are. And this is one of the letters on the floor. And this is a picture that they sent after it was fully complete. Cool thing about this, if you guys go to Broadway, you can step into this space and not be charged. It's part of the entryway before you get to the pay section. Hattie Lou Theater is a small theater company in Memphis, and they asked me to create design works to, I guess, sell their shows. And so I started with them in December of 2020 and gone on to produce more works using type and image. And it's kind of crazy now looking at that old work and looking at the new work and seeing how it's still a theme of pairing type and image and learning, or at least using like Photoshop tools to mask things out and having a good breadth of how that works and how it can work well. with text and type and texture. But nonetheless, like a new time of a new normal meant to embrace different. Like the pandemic shut everybody down and changed everybody's lives. And for me, it just meant I had time to think and see things in a different perspective, which meant there was time to make changes in the way that I personally operated for myself in the way that I wanted to be seen in the world. So I made some rules. First things first, I started posting work online, i.e. Instagram and not on my website. I have a website. I'm not in love with it. I hate the prospect of changing and updating websites because it's arduous. You got to write. It's all kind of weird. Number two, try a method of design that you've been a fan of but never attempted. So on that list was motion graphics, illustration, hand lettering, and animation, which animation and motion graphics are kind of in the same ballpark. Number three, commit to daily fitness, getting outside or doing something every day to invest in my body. Number four, saying yes to opportunities. And number five, submitting work to competitions or putting myself in spaces to be judged. So what I mean by that is I was a designer that was comfortable talking about my work, but not showing my work, which meant it was only a one-way dialogue. So I started making work for myself and changed my perspective on like what work meant and how I would make work for others. So of course I developed a habit of routine. The first things first, I started running daily. I started a mile a day challenge on April 17th of 2020. And a friend of mine, Daryl Springfield, who graduated in 2004 with us, challenged me to a 30-day run challenge. Today, this morning, was day 944, so my date with you all. I don't know what I'm gonna do for 1,000, but you have to figure out how to make momentum for yourself if you feel like things are stagnant. And then I started posting work. So these are like pieces, political pieces based on things that were happening at the time between April 5th and April 25th of 2020 around like the shutdown. And then I began lettering. So I started this hand lettering challenge with Mary Kate McDevitt and Simone Wilder. And Simone is actually in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was a 15-day lettering prompt to letter something every day based on something that I missed. And so these are my first forays into hand lettering. Yeah, and it was rough. Like I look back on this and I'm like, man, I can't believe I made these, but it was practice, right? And so what I know, I became productively neurotic, and it took me right back to the years that I had keys to the computer lab, and I would go every day and just spend day and night in the computer lab working on things. And so I've hand lettered almost 300 days past that 15-day challenge. So my process initially was using, an iPad and using Procreate to create, these lettered pieces. What you see, this background that's coming up is Dash playing on my iPad. And so sometimes we have collaborative pieces where I get to use his backgrounds. But from that, thinking about like where these things come from and what I'm lettering on, it's typically based on life and conversations and news. So it's like news and happenings at the time, like we were in political fight of our lives to get Trump out of office. And so most of these are based on that. Tear gas from others was in Portland, they were protesting voting rights, no vaccine for racism. I got saying yes to opportunities. I got asked by the Biden campaign, or at least the design team of that campaign, to produce a poster. And all of this is like from posting work to Instagram and people seeing this work. More stuff based on conversations on the news, no customer refund for election results. And then conversations on life. So this is a lettering series for mental health awareness. Like this stuff led to American Greetings reaching out for some greeting cards. Even life running. So I use my Nike Run Club app on my phone or my watch to run letters in the street. Funny thing about this letter E, I had to run it twice because I cut it short. So it's actually almost a mile for this E versus that half a mile. Also on life, a series honoring quotes of women of color for Women's History Month. This was in 2021. And really just fun to figure out like how type and how letter forms can emote different things and embody the people that speak them. After I moved to Connecticut, there were so many things as far as the learning curve that I had to learn. So New York is not New England. New Yorkers call themselves Southern. If you live in Connecticut, which is kind of crazy to me. It's like, and then pizza, the best pizza is a constant debate. Also in the South, when we go to a restaurant, we may take our time to peruse and then give our order. But if you're like waiting, they're like, can you get to it? So have your order ready. But nonetheless, like, you know, really be true to your dreams. So from that work, somebody reached out and said, hey, I think you should think about going to Yale. And so I applied and pulled on the thread and courageously like put myself in another place of judgment, submitted my portfolio and actually got in. So this is something that I lettered with a broad parallel pen as soon as I got here to remind myself, like, once you're here, that doesn't mean you get to relax, right? So why do anything safe? Like if you're taking a risk, you're gonna move your entire family, uproot everybody to do something, like you got to make it count. So one of my projects, like I'm taking letter form design from Tobias Farrar-Jones and Nina Stosinger. Tobias is like known for the typeface Gotham, which Barack Obama ran on, like the Hope poster, that geometric typeface. And it's been fantastic to learn under these folks. So in that class, they asked us to go and do a type revival, go look for a typeface that's older than like 1960 or 1965, redraw it and bring it into current context. So I didn't want to just go pick a typeface out of some type book in the library that some older person made and just bring that forward. I wanted to bring something current that had some cultural significance to me and cultural significance to people of color that look like me. So I went and looked at the Green Book, which was this periodical for Blacks traveling safely across the United States between 1935 or 1934 to 1973. And so looking at this masthead, it was a hand-drawn masthead of these 9 characters, and I wanted to like turn that into a typeface. So I went in and I noticed it was hand-drawn. It's like high contrast sans serifs with flares on the endings. It's got like these, again, flares and other weird characteristics on the stems. And like where they connect, it gets really thin. And so because I had been drawing letters all this time, every day, this daily practice of drawing letters, I was like, well, I could create a system and build out letters based on these 9 characters. So these are my like hand-drawn sketches of the 26 characters based on these 9 letters. And then I found some references that were made around that time out of Germany. but you can tell like they are vastly different. But I was using them as like skeletal references for my piece. So this is the actual typeface. It's typable. It's called VG Travelogue for Victor Green. And this is a pangram with the punctuation and numbers in there, and then a poster based on or featuring a quote from Victor Green. There will be a day sometime in the near future when this guy will not have to be published. And it's kind of crazy to think now, like we've got Google Maps or Apple Maps, and all these other devices that kind of help us navigate, and we don't necessarily even think about being safe for that kind of thing as we travel as much. Another school project, we had this site versus citation. And so my original site was the neighborhood that I actually live in now, and it's in a circle. And it was based on the fact that none of the sidewalks in the neighborhood connect, which is really strange. And it was based on like the breaks in the sidewalk, the intervals and the stoppages and the intersections and the halts and all that kind of thing. The one word I didn't use in that research was the word coup, which could also be seen as a stop. So in looking at that word, I dug into it a bit more, thinking about like the way we kind of know it as a coup d'etat, like taking over governments and things of that nature. And at that time, like the Sudanese government had just gone through a coup. And we were also going through somewhat of a coup in the January 6th craziness. And so I was digging into like visible coups and then more personal coups in the sense of like being told to wear a mask, and nobody really wants to do that because it was uncomfortable at the time. And then thinking about other ways that coups can take place. Like we're not naturally meant to be in the ocean, but we break the plane, go into the water, and that's a version of a coup. Having chocolate cake for breakfast is a coup on your diet. Or childbirth is a coup on the life that you know. So I decided to stage a coup of my own at the art school. And I brought in 150-gallon worth of leaves off of the street. I won't say I stole them, but people had collected them off of their lawns and put them in bags, and I just helped the trash people and brought them inside instead of leaving them outside. So here is, let's see if this will play, a stop motion video or a time-lapse video of me taking over the space at school and lettering on the floor using a broom as a stylus without a guide. So you can kind of see like folks are stopping and talking like, hey, what are you doing? Or why are you doing this? Let's see. So this took me, it took me probably 6 or 7, it probably took me 2 or 3 hours it actually took me 6 or 7 hours to create this. And I had a few different iterations of it. And I just left it. And my classmates came in and they were like, wow, this is cool. And they interacted with it a bit. And this is the director of the program. And she's like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Because I did it. I started it at like 6 and left school at like 11. And it just kind of left it out there for people to experience. So at noon that day, I get a forwarded email saying that the work needs to be deinstalled. And so officially my coup lasted for 21 hours. So I don't know, they said it was flammable and it could do some things. So going into like coups, this is a hard drive. And we had to, I guess for the second semester of my first year, we had to like do a project on an object. And on the second day, of 2022, my hard drive crashed. So it was like completely wiped out, like all this prior work that I had done from the previous semester and years before. But I decided to turn it into a project. And so I was just thinking about how a burned out hard drive is akin to like a wet book or a wet newspaper. Like you just can't retrieve the information. And then I was thinking about urns and going back to like funeral programs. And I eulogized my hard drive as a project. So this is an acknowledgement of life from a hard drive. And because nobody but me knows this thing, there's not really much that I could talk about that would make you all feel the depth of pain of the hard drive, you know, as I felt, but this just these few words would make it plain. So from there, I created a narrative and a story. You know, I didn't create a story. I told my story about my relationship to my hard drive in a 1,500 word essay in the shape of my hard drive. And I built an urn for this story because my hard drive was unretrievable and the people that I sent it to didn't send it back to me. So all I've got is this enclosure, and it sits on my desk as a reminder to back up my work. So thinking about archives and archiving work, I take my kids to the libraries as often as I can. This is the Beinecke Library here at Yale for rare books and manuscripts. And when I took them there, we ran into a curator, and I said, "Hey, I'm glad to meet you." Like, his name is Michael Moran. You're the one person I wanted to meet. I had a question I wanted to ask. And he's like, "Well, go ahead and shoot." And I said, "Well, do you have a copy of David Walker's appeal?" Because I was looking for the appeal to reference for a typographic project. And he says, "Well, it's funny you asked that. I've got a copy of it on my desk." And so he walks us through, and you can kind of see these are the stacks. He pushes a button in the wall, and the wall opens up kind of like a bat cave. We take an elevator downstairs, and he wheels in this cart that has the book on it. So my kids are like physically handling David Walker's appeal, which is like just mind-blowing to me. And then he hands them a copy of Langston Hughes's Weary Blues, his teaching copy that has his notes in it, his handwritten notes. And again, just like more just mind blown. And then this is like Langston Hughes's writing pen, Langston Hughes's wallet, and they've got all of these effects of his. And then this is like another book, like from Richard Wright. Like, it was some crazy stuff coming off of this cart. But from there, I created a typeface based on the library itself and the forms and the blocks on the walls of that library called Stacks Bold. Stacks meaning the stacks of a library is what the librarians call it, where the books are held. And then Stacks Light based on the counterforms from those blocks. And Yale's motto is light and truth, Lui Veritas. And the truth is, it's light and truth amongst many collections. And if you don't go to these collections, you don't know what's in those collections. So I implore you, like, to go to Tennessee State's library, to go into their special collections to see what you can unearth and uncover that many people just don't know about, or they've been forgotten about over time. So I decided to create a book for my kids, an anthology of poems called In the Deep of the Stacks, from Black figures that are collected in the Beinecke Library, like Richard Wright, James Baldwin's collection of papers, writings, and notes are all in the Beinecke. James Weldon Johnson, who's donated all of his stuff there, Langston Hughes and W.E.B. Du Bois, who had some overlap in Nashville at Fisk, and Zora Neale Hurston. And so, you know, all of the typefaces you see used in this book are mine. Which leads me to this next project. David Walker's Appeal in 4 articles, which is a preamble to the colored citizens of the world, was a manifesto for people in slavery to like rise up and leave their stations and rise against the oppressors at that time. Like in the writing, he talks about outnumbering slaveholders like 3 million to 100,000. And after he put this out, he was like actually poisoned and died at like 31. But he was a writer for Freedom's Journal, which was the first Black paper in the country, founded in Boston, but they disseminated their newspapers in New York. And at the time, there was a company called the Boston Type Foundry that was founded in 1817 that I was in doing the digging and looking at the Freedom's Journal and David Walker's Appeal and looking at their type specimen. Brevier number 4 is the closest thing to what they were using at the time. And so the Beinecke like sent me scans of the entire appeal, for which I could fish out all of the letters and create a typeface aptly named Appeal. And so I created an uppercase and lowercase version of this. And because it was meant for a pamphlet, which was like a 6x9 size, the type size is like 7 point in the actual book. So it was meant to be read at small sizes. Can you guys still hear me? Okay. I'm almost done. So this next thing, I was asked by Brian Job of TriStar Arts to participate in an exhibition at TriStar Arts in Knoxville, Tennessee. And he asked me if I had ever done a letter from sculpture before. And I'm like, nah, I had never done that, but I'll think about it. And so he said, well, maybe you can, figure it out while you're at Yale. And while you're up there, I can do an exhibition or something. I was like, all right, we'll see. So I wrote for a grant and a fellowship here, and they actually funded the materials. And so I came up with this concept of thinking about the homonym of stayed versus stayed in the sense of like Black Americans' existence in the United States. As I'm thinking about spatial awareness and travel and where you are in the proximity of Blackness. So at one point, African Americans had the opportunity to be sent back to Africa, which is how Liberia was founded. So the fact that people chose to stay is a thing. And then thinking about respectability and consistency in being stayed is also a thing. So I hand lettered this thing, or hand lettered these characters, and drew it out, kind of planned it out. Took it into Illustrator, vectored it, printed it out, so that it ended up being 8 feet tall by 3 feet wide, and cut out a stencil and chalked sheet metal, and collaborated with Desmond Lewis, who you guys had the pleasure of talking with, I think a few weeks ago. So he helped me cut these out, plasma cut these letters out of sheet metal. And you can kind of see them in real space, separate before they were connected. So you can see Desmond helped me weld these things together. And these nice, interesting counterforms. And this is my son standing next to it, and before it was crated to be shipped to Knoxville. And these are images from the show. Sketches and preliminary work. And this is it in real time. It's actually on loan right now at Fisk University. So you guys can drive up Jefferson Street and go see it at the Van Vechten Gallery. It's in the lobby. So if the gallery is closed and the doors are open, you actually can see it and interact with it. This last and final piece was the second part of that collaborative arts and media grant. I was awarded, so Desmond gave me, I sat down with him and I said, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to make another letterform sculpture, but this time out of a different material. I want to work with rolled steel. And he said, well, you can buy tubing. And so I said, all right, well, I ordered the tubing. It actually didn't cost that much, but I bought two 24-foot pieces of steel tubing. And this is the machine that I used. And I went back and forth like with this little mock-up and bent these 24-foot pieces into a letter form. So this is a letter form. It stands 14.5 feet tall. It's currently in the School of Art right now because I haven't found a home for it yet. But it's meant to evoke the conversation of what is not being said and the elephant in the room, right? Like as you walk around it, it deconstructs itself. So if you look at it from the side and you can't see anything, it almost reminds you of like being in a subway or walking down the hall and hearing inaudible conversation. But if you stand at a certain point, like it stares at you directly, so you can see, the S, the A, and the Y. So that's the end of the work. But I really just want to implore that your work will show you more of you than you actually will know. So definitely show your work and show your process so that people can have dialogue with it. You'll have a lot more ideas about who you are and who you really are by simply just trying, and don't rest on your laurels by feeling like you know what the software is, or you have a general idea, or you want to do a one-off for a project. And I'll leave you with this about Tennessee State. Like, it taught me like 3 major things. Number one is to find a yes in order to go forward. So if people are telling you no, like, you got to keep going until there is a yes so that you can go forward, so that you don't stop your momentum. Number 2, if your professors don't teach it, you have to teach yourself or seek it out for yourself. Like, we only had 2, Kalina and I only had 2 graphic design classes, and Kalina is now the head of the department, and I've now taught at 2 institutions, and you just have to keep pushing forward. And the third thing is to never stop learning and never stop climbing. Because if you stop, you become stagnant, and then you're no longer part of the conversation, or you're no longer contributing to the conversation. But with that, like, from Tennessee State and what they're giving you, you're ready for anything. Like, it might be weird, it might be strange, but you're no different than any other student that's pursuing an art career. There's not a singular path that you can take. You just navigate your own. So proceed and be bold. My email address is here listed, and you can find more works of mine on my Instagram page.
Thank you so much, David. That was fantastic.
Yeah, I second that. I loved everything. I loved we went old school and like saw the beginning to how you're getting to think about your practice now, an art practice. Yeah, that's why we call it an art practice, because we're continuing to learn and practice. Do we have any questions?
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Yeah, any questions from anyone? And while you're thinking, and we might just have time for 1 or 2, but I did want to say that one memory that I have of David from TSU is that he was always working. I mean, that's like the one thing that I remember when I think about our time as students at TSU. You were in the lab constantly. And if I remember right, you were learning like Flash, like really early when Flash was like kind of just getting, going. And you were, I remember you doing Flash. I remember you doing the t-shirts and working maybe in the print shop or doing, I just constantly doing
Yeah.
that. So that's kind of a connective thread that I see in your work today. So do you have, I don't know, do you have any advice? I think your entire presentation is a testament to work ethic, but I think, you know, I guess I would ask, do you have any advice for a student who might be struggling with maintaining a consistent work ethic?
Well, now that I'm making work for myself, it's not as difficult to maintain. I mean, I've always had clients, and at some point, like, I stopped worrying about the money. So much so that, yeah, I mean, I'll make stuff for free because it'll take me into another direction, and could lead to either a further conversation or lead to me learning another process. So yeah, it hadn't been a hindrance at all. And I think reframing how I've been practicing and not like making work for others, and understanding like that I have had a breadth of experience in all these different places that contribute to my thought process towards the why and the how, really just informs the practice even more so.
You guys can put questions in the chat, or you can unmute and just ask if you want to do that.
And see, Derek, you got a question? It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well, brother. Man, I'm impressed by your presentation. Definitely, just context, a former student of David at MTSU. And David was probably the first example, or the only example, of this holistic approach to just, creativity and design and personal development. I always knew David was working on something, doing something. And so I'm just now getting to this point in my career where it makes sense. It all kind of makes sense. And I've been working professionally probably for the past 6 or 7 years now. And this is kind of like the first year where I've really gotten focus and clarity. And so it was really refreshing to see that you're still pushing it, and it's really inspiring, for sure. And I think if I could just say anything for students out there, is that school is an opportunity for you to be creative and to push, and to not think of things as pass or fail, but just opportunities to learn, because it all comes together. It does. And so if you're not trying to learn and you're not reframing what failing is, you're not going to progress and you're not going to grow. And it doesn't make sense right now. It doesn't, but it will make sense. I promise you, we will put it together. So, yeah, I feel blessed to have now in my career, have the opportunity to hop in these things and make these connections, and to listen to David. And I've got a good buddy of mine that's still really close with David. So I've been keeping an ear, knowing what David's up to. So, we're going to chat, and hopefully I can get connected with David real soon.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Absolutely.
I heard Miss Professor Sales saying that you used to work in Flash. Did you do any sort of animation as well?
I did, but I pulled out like all of these DVDs that I'd saved all this work on, and I don't have Flash or anything that could read a SWF file. I would have shown it if I had it, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure it would have been just as cringeworthy as that other stuff. But
I mean, it's first time's a first time for everything. I was interested because I knew that I was doing some work with the communications department in terms of animation, at least.
yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Were there any other questions? I know we're just over time, but maybe we have time for one more if someone wants to unmute or type it in you have a couple of good comments in the chat as well. But if anyone wanted to unmute, this is your chance. All right, Courtney, did you have any final thoughts?
I'll give some closing words. Everybody have a great holiday. Thank you, David Jon Walker, for joining us all the way from New England. And we'll roll out our next art talk in January. So you can see what we have lined up for next and what kind of programming. We're faculty show in the gallery we're excited about. It's called Image. So we'll see y'all soon. Thanks.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone.